Hi, John Harbaugh here with the Harbaugh Coaching Academy. The importance of coaches in the lives of young athletes can never be underestimated, especially today. I hope you enjoy the valuable, practical insights in this interview with our expert coach. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. A couple Miami guys here. Sean McVay, thanks for coming. It's great to have you.
Of course, I appreciate it. Happy to do anything for you, Coach, and got to keep the cradle of coaches going.
Well, we're proud of you, man. You've done amazing things, and it's a special place there. You know, we were different eras a little bit. There's been some talk. You know, you were a wide receiver. I was a corner. You know, they put me into the boundary, to the small side of the field for a reason over there. I know you were a very gifted player. You know, they speak real highly of you. You think I could have covered you, or would you have run right by me?
You know what? I don't know. I think you got a good quick jam. I think you could stay right in my low hip and be in good phase.
Yeah.
I think you look like you could still move around pretty good. I feel like I don't know if I've got it anymore.
I think you've been in the weight room. I like the way you look, but it's an amazing place. All the great coaches we had, the great friends, right? You talk about college football in Miami, you know, the things that you took from that and what a great experience that was.
Yeah. I would say this, you know, what resonates with me, Coach, is the people make the place. And there's been so many special people that have made Miami what it is. And I was fortunate enough to be a third-generation player there. My grandfather, John, you know, who's passed now, he was a center there. My uncle, John Jr., was an all-MAC safety, and then I came around. But when I went there, you could just feel, you know, Terry Hepner was the head coach at the time, and he had just such a good plan. He had such an amazing way to be able to connect with his players, have the agility to be able to adjust and adapt, brought great coaches along with them. And then some of the guys that I came on my official visit with are still some of my closest friends. A couple of the guys are on our coaching staff with the Rams, and so, you know, loved my time there. There were some good times and there were some challenging times, but that's what you love about football.
Yeah, it's always challenging. That's the thing about football, right? You know, football's tough, man. It's not easy. It's not really like, all sports are great. All activities are great. You know, totally. You can be in theater, you learn amazing lessons. Football is unique. You know, it matters. It makes a difference in young people's lives, especially young boys' lives like we were when we grew up. And you kind of, you know, become a man sort of through football. At least that's how I feel. What is it about football that makes it that?
Well, I think number one, it's the greatest team sport that there is. And inevitably, you know, usually in life, you're either coming out of a storm, you're getting ready to go in one, or you're in the midst of one. And football teaches you how to be able to navigate through those different adversities, those ebbs and flows, how to be able to connect, how to communicate, how to be able to collaborate with a group. You know, I've heard Coach K talk about this before, and I loved it, but football really epitomizes it. He would always talk about 2 is better than 1 as long as 2 can work as 1. Well, really, 11 is better than 1 as long as 11 can work as 1. And you talk about the importance.
I'm writing that one down, man.
It's
That's
a good one, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I can't. You know, every good one. We're all the best thieves too, right?
Absolutely.
You know, all the good coaches, but it just teaches you so many different things. And in a lot of instances, whether you're playing or coaching, if you apply a lot of the things that we talk about and say, how do I apply these things, not only in sports but in my life, usually it's going to, you know, those things have a chance to really cross over, and there's a lot of things that you can learn from it.
So you were a player coming up, you know, it wasn't easy, challenging. You know, some of those experiences you had, some of that adversity you faced.
Well, I think number one, you know, at Miami, you go there, you have expectations. I was fortunate enough to play as a freshman, got a starting role as a sophomore, and then I ended up having an ankle injury where it really forced me to, you know, miss a lot of my junior year, play some of that, and ended up having to end my career a little bit earlier than what I wanted. And in a lot of instances, so much of your identity is tied up in this game. And I think you learn about the perspective, you learn about, all right, what is the real purpose in terms of what can I learn from these moments to be able to be stronger moving forward, and whether that's as a coach or a player. And I think there was a lot of reflection for me at that time that, you know, a lot of those lessons were so applicable to being a good coach, but in the moment when I look back on it, you know, it really kind of just shattered your world where, you know, you love this game so much and you can falsely think that's the only thing that you bring to the table because this game has brought so many blessings. And so perspective is everything, and being able to take it, look at what can I learn from it and how can I use this to be able to catapult the lessons that you take from it moving forward, to be able to, you know, be empathetic to the players that we're coaching. And that was a challenging time for me, but fortunately I was able to dive into coaching, and in a lot of ways when guys get injured, it certainly helps to be able to have that empathy and that understanding and try to be able to help them navigate through, these challenges that inevitably we all face and that we want to help our guys go through.
Yeah, you lived it, so you've been there before, so you understand it. Then when did you decide you wanted to coach? I mean, you've got a coaching family now, it's in your blood.
That's
but
right.
Did you always know?
I kind of did. I'm sure it's just like you. You probably always knew you wanted to be involved in it. I wasn't sure exactly which direction that I wanted to go with it, whether it was in personnel or in coaching. And I was so fortunate that right when I got done playing at Miami of Ohio, got a chance to get on the staff basically as a secretary with the Bucks when John Gruden was the head coach. And all of that was as a result of my grandfather and the legacy that he set and the relationships that he built, the way that he treated people, doing things the right way. And it's almost embarrassing that I got that opportunity. But as soon as I did it, Coach, you get on the grass with the guys, you have the study of the film, but the interaction is what you thrive on the most. I have tremendous respect and love for this game, but what gives you the most joy is the purpose from the interaction with the human beings, whether it's your coaches or your players, helping try to, elevate and people reach and realize their highest potential. And I knew immediately that I wanted to be able to do it, and you just pour everything you have into it to try to help and be the best you can possibly be.
That's awesome. Is that what makes a great coach?
I think so. I think that, there's so many layers, as you know, but, the one thing that I've always admired about you is the consistency over time. And I think in its simplest form, we want to try to be elevators. We want to try to be able to help people reach their highest potential. And I think there's a lot of different things that leaders set an example for, but I think in its simplest form, you want to be a great teacher, you want to be a great communicator, but you also want to be a great leader. And what that means is that you elevate every person in every situation that you're a part of. That's what great leaders do. That's what you want to strive to be able to do. And I know when I reflect back on, the good times, it's been because there's a purpose about serving others and because you are always operating with your cup full when you're helping people continue to grow. You're helping them navigate through the inevitable times of challenges that we all go through. And then when I have looked back and said, man, I should have been better, it's usually when it's become a little bit more about me than I ever wanted it to. Your own selfish ambitions and, in a lot of ways, we all are passionate about it, but there's a real purpose that's sustainable through the good and the bad. And I think more importantly, the bad, when you want to be able to realize, all right, who do you want to be? What kind of example do you want to set for these players, for these coaches, and how consistently can you be in the midst of all the different things that we navigate through? And I'm not just saying it, but that's why I've had such respect for you from afar, because that's exactly what you've embodied.
I appreciate that. Yeah. You've done some amazing things the last couple of years, not just like in terms of wins and losses, although you've done that, not just in terms of yards and touchdowns and how tough it is to defend your schemes and the things you do in the plays. We practiced against each other, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think we stopped one pass the whole practice. And
I think you did.
But it was really fun to watch you work, and I see in your passion the way you talk to your coaches. You've had an unbelievable number of coaches that have come through your program and have gone on to become assistants and head coaches and been very successful. How do you do it? How do you develop those guys the way you have?
Well, I think the number one thing, I think it was, beneficial because when I got the opportunity at such a young age, you're around a lot of other really uniquely talented coaches, and those are guys that you've kind of come up with. And so fortunately you have some insight and some exposure to these guys that you're saying, man, I was so fortunate to get this opportunity, and I think these guys would do a great job. And I think I've been given a lot of credit for some of the success that those guys have had, but they've given to me just as much, and they've been a huge part of our culture. But I think there's been a commitment to a philosophy, there's been a commitment to values and standards that we want to be able to operate with, and it really is all about helping people reach and realize their highest potential and doing it in an authentic way and in a positive, never disrespectful, but a demanding way. And I think we're drawn to people that are, similar to us with that passion, with that purpose. That's what all of those guys that have gone on to do great things, but they were instrumental in setting the foundation for us. And going into year 7 now, the times that we've done it at the right, when we've done it the way that we're capable of. I'm not talking about just the results, but when you look back and you say, we're doing an after-action review, you're reflecting back on your day, are you upholding the standards and the values that you want to abide by on a daily basis? Those were the guys that were helpful to keep me accountable. I'm sure you feel the same way. I don't always necessarily get the information that I need to hear. Sometimes people will tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear, and those guys were never afraid to do that, and they did it in a way that didn't piss me off too much too. So
sometimes they don't tell you anything. It's like,
that's right.
Don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me something.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Just work with me right here. But those guys have been great. But I do think it was really beneficial, Coach, to be able to get exposure to a lot of really talented guys that just hadn't gotten their first shot yet.
Right.
And I was so fortunate to be able to get that shot, and then those guys have maximized it. But then I've also had an opportunity to be around great examples of guys that have done it for a long period of time. I can't, say enough about the influence that Wade Phillips had on me and what he did to be able to really set a foundation and to be able to use him as a sounding board. John Fossil, when he was our special teams coordinator. So we've had a lot of, great coaches with experience, and then some that maybe haven't had as much, but all of them are high character people. They're great teachers, they're great communicators, and they're really intrinsically motivated to try to help others.
Yeah, you've been around great coaches, and you've been that guy too, and the Grudens, and those guys are beautiful, man. I love those guys.
Yeah.
And we get a chance to do it now at this level, but it's not why you get into it. It's not about, our games are on TV, everybody watches, it's kind of a big deal, but it's the same exact job, isn't it, in college, in high school, in junior high, in youth football, things that make coaches special, and the coaches you had coming up, the way they made you feel, what do you say to those guys? Those guys doing it at that level, is it any different at that level than our level about what's important?
No, it's a lot of the same things that I learned growing up, playing high school football at Marist are some of the same lessons that you try to embody. And, the work ethic, the communication, the football character that we want to abide by, being committed to a process and really focusing on those things and understanding how vital that is when you just stack blocks and you do it the right way. And, Alan Chadwick, guys like Dan Perez, Paul Etheridge. But one of the things that they always instilled in me that you never ever want to lose sight of is, man, it's powerful when you feel believed in.
Yeah.
And you feel like people are invested in you.
Yep.
And hey, I got your back. I'm with you. I care enough about you to be honest, but I'm pushing you because I believe in you. And I want to be there for you when things don't go well, and I'm going to continue to keep you humble when things are going well. But, the power of belief is something else. And, that's what we always want to be as coaches is great embodiments of those things that are in alignment with doing things the right way on a consistent basis. And, those guys did it at a high level. I think in a lot of instances too, some of the things that I know I've taken for granted being at this level, the foundational fundamentals and techniques. Hey, how are we taking a snap underneath the center? How are we getting into a three-point stance? How are we making sure that we have the appropriate posture, whether I'm an offensive lineman, defensive lineman? What kind of alignment are we going to get in for bump technique for a corner, the proper stance for a receiver? All those things, that those guys do such a great job of that I know I've sometimes taken for granted. I think in a lot of instances, those coaches that get you early on are the ones that are some of the best coaches that I've been around, and I don't think the level is necessarily in alignment with some of the best coaches that I've been with.
Man, I agree with that 100%. And the thing that gets lost sometimes is we assume those guys, or we hope those guys are going to know how to do that stuff, and it ends up coming back to plague you in the end, because really the game is won and lost by fundamentals and by doing things the right way.
True.
And those coaches that we had coming up, I think about some of the coaches my daughter had, or I watched some Pee Wee coaches, or like the young coaches we had. You don't have any kids yet.
Not yet.
But you will, and when you're talking to your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, and stuff like that. The thing that you hit on right there in terms of belief and wanting them to come back and play again, and taking something away they learn about themselves. It's no different at our level. Someone in your corner. Man, that's powerful stuff.
It is.
Whether you're coaching a 9-year-old team or a junior high team or a high school team. Is that something that you would look for, that you want to see?
Absolutely. I think, and you and I have talked about this before, Coach, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I don't care if you're high school, little league, collegiate, or at our level. And that's the most important thing. It's about building and developing relationships, because I think then that enables you to be able to be demanding on a player, and they know, man, Coach Harbaugh or Coach McVay, they love me and they care about me and they want me to be at my best. And I tell guys all the time, if I'm hard on you, it's because I believe in you,
right,
because I know what you're capable of, and I want to see you consistently do the things that you've shown you're capable of on a snap in, snap out basis. I want to see you be able to respond. I want to see you be able to hit the reset button. And you can do that when there's that mental toughness and that core belief inside yourself, but also from the people around you to let you know you're not by yourself.
Right.
That's what's so different about football than, tennis, golf, some of these sports, man. You got 10 other teammates, you got a bunch of coaches, and you're never by yourself, you're never alone, and you don't ever want to have people feel anything other than fully supported, but also know that, hey, I'm with people that are going to help me, push me in the right ways, and at any level, that's key and paramount for success.
A lot of different paths, right, to becoming a coach at whatever level you end up being.
Sure.
We all took our path. You talk about caring, and that's the crux of the whole thing and fundamentals. But also, you learned a lot of football. Like, you learned a lot of football in a short time, X and O wise. You got really good at the X's and O's. How did you do it, and what advice would you have for young coaches that way?
Man, the first thing is I was around so many great coaches that were willing to invest in me. And there's an element of you could feel like they were giving back. When I think about the trajectory of what I've been so fortunate with, Coach, I got done playing college football, great system, Miami of Ohio under Shane Montgomery, Terry Hepner, learning from those guys. Great foundational understanding of the game from my high school coaches with Alan Chadwick, who's a legend in Georgia high school sports. But then you say, all right, well, let's go ahead and get into professional football. And it actually coincided when John started up his FFCA, where I went over there, and you're learning football from an all-22 perspective. And he's bringing different coaches in there. You're getting exposure right after that first year in Tampa with he and Jay and spending all that time. And then you flash forward, you get a chance to coach right away in the UFL with the Florida Tuskers. And coaching guys that had played at a high level, but you're around other professional coaches. And then you go work with Washington when Mike Shanahan's the head coach. Kyle Shanahan's there, and there's a commitment to a philosophy of marrying the run and the pass, understanding how plays can play off of one another, and how are we understanding what is the defense being taught, and how can we use those things to be able to manipulate their rules or vice versa, and that cat and mouse game that we love so much. And then you get a chance to be a coordinator under Jay Gruden. And those 3 years were so instrumental. And I'll never forget how much Jay looked out for me early on, where he lets you take your lumps. And he really protected me a lot more than I would have ever appreciated now being in our seats. And I'm forever grateful for that. But it's all about those guys that were willing to invest, being around great players. I've learned as much from some of these great players when you really start to ask the Eric Weddles of the world, what are you really seeing? Or the Matthew Staffords and the Cooper Kupps and Aaron Donalds. And it's about, the players, the coaches, but, and then always being interested. I've heard it said before, interested people are interesting. If you're interested in something that somebody else is passionate about and you really have a desire to be able to learn from them, people like sharing when they love this game. And I always try to do that without being the irritating young guy asking all the questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be the irritating young guy. You got to go out to clinics, man. You got to go make some calls and go visit some people too.
That's right.
And be a part of it. Find a way. Your team, man, amazing success. Love the way your teams play. Obviously, you have a vision for your team. And I think, sharing that a little bit, how do you create it? How do you communicate it? How do you maintain it? How do you grow it?
Sure.
Working through adversity, that picture you want to see for your team.
Well, I think, what was really helpful and such a good learning thing that, you and I have talked about is when I first got to LA, things went relatively well early, but I often think about, you didn't worry about the things that sometimes I now let bother me. And there is an element of, hey, when you go into a place, what are the most important things? How do we really keep the main thing the main thing? And the first thing is, how do we really want to establish the culture that we want to be able to abide by? And really the culture is how we do things around here. And there's got to be a shared ownership. It's not necessarily my culture, the coaches, it's our culture. And I think you got to be able to reestablish that every single year. But a couple of the things that we build the foundations on is our communication. You show me a great organization, you show me a great team, I'll show you an organization or a team that a trademark of what they do at a high level is they communicate really well. And that's not just, transmitting information, that's also listening and being able to collaborate and have that shared ownership. So, hey, how can we be the best communicators in the world, both visually and verbally? And that's not exclusive to the hand signals, that's with the body language and our responses. And then how can we represent...
So let's dig into that.
Sure.
Visual, that's really good now.
Yeah.
Visual communication.
Absolutely.
Body language, signals.
Yeah.
Players, coaches, with one another. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the vibe, and I tell our players all the time, I see better than I hear, and you can really see when you flip the film on, what kind of energy are we really using from one another, whether that's a stop or whether that's a response, where, some of the most powerful examples of that are how quickly the defense takes the field on a sudden change when we put, if the offense turns the ball over in the tight red area on the opposing, where now that forces a team where, hey, they're already in a situation where they've got points and they're likely to try to punch this thing in. Hey, what kind of energy and what kind of vibe do we take the field with, hey, I got your back? And that can be communicated without those types of things. Or how do we play complementary football? Or how do we really go get guys off of the pile and pick each other up? What does that look like? What does it look like the way that the special teams unit takes the field when the defense comes on the field, when the offense comes on the field? How we respond to those negative setbacks? Is it the head slash, down, or is it the eyes up, let's move on to the next play with the resilient mindset and mentality that we want to embody? Those are the things that you want to do. And then I think there's just got to be a joy in it. You just look at it. You can't really, you can never be stressed and joyful at the same time. So let's go have an authentic joy, a zest for the opportunity that we have to go be able to compete. And I think that's what we had early on. And I'll be honest with you, Coach, and we talked about this a little bit. We've had such a good long run of success. And then this past year, it was a very humbling year. And I would be the first to tell you that as a leader, I didn't do nearly a good enough job for our team of exhibiting that joy. I let the expectations we had get in the way of having that joy. It becomes a little bit more about you than you'd ever like to admit, and you start losing the real purpose for why you do this, about the players, about the coaches. And some of our players who I love, you talk about being able to hear, the things where people need to tell you the truth. Cooper Kupp, one of the greatest players I've ever coached, also one of the most special human beings I've ever been around. When I'm reflecting with him, he said, here's the thing. I think that, we really probably became a little bit more results-oriented than process-oriented. And you lose that joy, and then, guys are playing, instead of playing loose with, hey, let's go attack success, there's a little bit of you're almost shackled by your own expectations, and we don't ever want to do that. And I think that's one of the things that we haven't done that I'm hopeful we can get back to.
It's a big challenge, though, because very few teams do that. Very few teams go back to back. I mean, especially in this era, because it's balanced and you've got all the other issues. But that very thing right there, man, it's like on the way there. You have that feeling and that joy, and it's all about kind of how us together. We're building together. Now all of a sudden, everybody's telling you how great you are, how great you're supposed to be, and you feel that pressure just a little bit, and you lose sight of the other things, and you look back and you say, well, I see how that happened. But how in the world can you avoid that? I mean, it's kind of almost, you're almost kind of subjected to that. You're kind of sentenced to that kind of a situation.
Yep.
And everybody talks about, we're going to run this thing back. We're going to carry this forward.
Absolutely.
And yet you really can't do that. And that's a mystery right now. I mean, I'm interested in that. I'd like to win another one, then try to figure out how to solve that problem the second time. First,
those would be champagne problems.
That's a champagne problem, but it's real, man. I mean, everybody points at you and tells you what you're supposed to do, and then you're supposed to not feel that. And then you got guys, everybody kind of feels like they were the ones that did it, and there's certain entitlements that get to be a part of, even from the best people.
I saw an interview, and I don't know, it was a soundbite. I don't know exactly if it took place recently or not, but I heard Coach Saban talk about, we always talk about as coaches, but then do you really believe it? Where you say every year's a new year, you got to be able to reset, reestablish, renew, all those types of things. Right. And I think that's really what you have to do. Right. After every single season, how are you onboarding people, whether that's players or coaches? How are we really studying ourselves while also being in tune with the landscape of the league? How are we reestablishing the values and the standards that we want to operate with culturally, and really committing to it instead of just kind of checking a box or saying, well, we've got continuity. These guys kind of know how we want to be able to do it. And I don't think you can take anything for granted. And I've always kind of said it, but I do think it took a humbling experience like last year for you to really understand how real that is. And that's where that experience, we've talked about before, repetition is the mother of learning. Well, for us, those reps are valuable to be able to figure out, all right, how do we navigate through the ebbs and flows? How do we lead on a consistent basis with the things that we want to be able to do? And how can we really be honest with ourselves when we're doing our after-action review about reassessing, renewing, and reestablishing things on a year-to-year basis?
That's really good. I mean, the energy it takes to do that, that's hard, man. But
it is.
But if you're conscious of it, you got a chance at least, probably. All right, youth football. football, all right? Trying to figure out, like, parents are trying to figure out the value of football for their kids. At what age should they start playing football, flag football, tackle football? You got any thoughts on that?
What I think is, it's such a great game, and it's brought so many blessings in my life. Whether it's flag, I have total empathy and understanding for some of the concerns that maybe parents have, but I think it is important that when you say, okay, well, let's talk about flag football first. Great way to be able to kind of immerse yourself in a game, learn some of the nuances of it, but then when you want to get into tackle football, I think it all starts with being able to teach the appropriate techniques and fundamentals. And the valuable lessons that can come, whether you're playing flag or whether you're playing tackle football, the things that sports teach you and the way that you learn how to be able to relate and connect with people from different backgrounds and come together for a common goal. I mean, it's cliche, but God, it's not. It's just so true that you can learn so many different things and you can learn so many new ways of being able to connect, to collaborate, and everybody ultimately working towards a common goal. You learn about how to navigate through adversity. You learn about how to stay humble through those good times. But I think for those people that are concerned about the injuries, I think it's all about understanding, all right, how much do we trust the people that are teaching the appropriate fundamentals and the techniques? We're not naive to know that injuries, they can occur, but there's a lot of different things where injuries can occur that we move about our lives in ways that are never really brought to the surface. And I think if there is a passion, if there's a comfort level, there's a lot of great teachers out there that understand how to appropriately apply the way that we want to tackle, the way that we want to be able to fit blocks, the way that we want to keep our head out of the game, to minimize some of the things that, from my understanding, people have a lot of concerns about. But I'm just such a big advocate of this game because it's brought so many blessings in my life. I know that I'm a better person because of all those different things. And in a lot of instances, it's from some of the challenging things that forces you to be more resilient, to be able to develop the appropriate perspective, because inevitably life's going to throw different curveballs at you. And if you can use sports as a way of learning and then applying those lessons, you're going to be better. I just don't see anybody that doesn't ever say, man, I sure got a lot out of that game.
Yeah, very few people say I regret I ever played that game.
Right? I mean, but it's so true.
So you have to work hard to get where you're at. Coaches do, man. Coaches work hard. And I know you've kind of talked about this in the past a little bit too, in terms of what it takes out of you and your family as you start growing up. Coaches are coming up through the ranks like you did. They're trying to be the best they can be, and yet they got families, they got kids. How do you balance all that out and try to be the best you can be both at home and work?
Yeah, it's funny. I think, we always talk about as coaches all the time, we've got our game plan. You got your call sheet, offense, defense. You know what you want to be able to do special teams wise, but how often are we really building a game plan for life? That's in alignment with saying, like, who do I want to be, and what are the things that are in alignment with me being that person that I want to be as a husband, as a father, but also as a coach? And how do I allocate and how am I efficient with my time throughout the course of the day where, hey, I'm going to work really hard, but I'm also going to make sure that there's a balance that allows me to be fulfilled and allows me to sustain a certain level of consistency over time. And I'd be lying to you if I said I have all the answers, but that's part of that deep dive of being able to try to figure that out. And I think there's this narrative in our society now that, all right, hey, you sleep when you die or you just work as hard as you possibly can. But I can tell you what's around the corner is burnout. And if you want to sustain and if you really want to have a joy and a stillness and a peace, you got to figure out how to balance those things. You got to figure out how to incorporate, getting your rest, doing all those little things. I used to roll my eyes. Oh, I don't need as much sleep. Oh, yeah. Well, you're a lot better when you do get the appropriate amount of sleep. You're a lot more patient, whether it be with your players or with your family. You're a lot more present in everything that you do. And so I think it's about building a game plan for your life and being able to say, all right, how do I want to allocate the appropriate amount of time to get everything I need to get done, but doing it in a more efficient manner that allows me to be at home, that allows me to be the supportive father, the supportive husband that my family deserves, while also not sacrificing being a great coach. And I think those things are attainable. I'd be lying if I said I got it all figured out right now, but the more that you try to figure out what is that rhythm and routine and how do you want to be able to move throughout the course of the week, and then also years when you want to do this for an elongated period of time, I think you'd probably be a better person to answer that question. But I think it's about the balance, the recovery habits, and making sure that you're disciplined to be able to follow a rhythm and routine. And not feeling like, all right, when things aren't going well, I'm just going to work harder. You want to work smarter.
Right.
And you want to be able to be solution oriented. Those are the things that I'm hopeful that I can apply as I keep moving forward and keep learning every single year.
That's right on, man. The fact that you're thinking about it means that you're figuring it out. That's good. Last thing about this, but it's a big job you got, right? I mean, you're working, you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. You got to lead in a lot of different directions, follow in different directions.
Sure.
How do you manage all that?
Well, I think it's all about surrounding yourself with people that you can lean on and not feeling like it's a one-man show. Being able to understand, all right, who are the different people that are experts within this arena that I can lean on. Ultimately, we have to make a lot of those tough decisions, but how can we surround ourselves with as many valuable people and resources to make the best decisions and stack consistently good decisions on a daily basis? How can you make sure that, being able to deal with people clear, open, honest, and direct in a lot of the tough conversations? I know one of the things that I've had, challenges with is the amount of tough conversations that we have to have and being able to navigate through being liked and being respected. And sometimes they go in alignment and sometimes they don't. But what you never regret is being totally upfront and honest with a guy. And they might not agree with you at the time, but I think they'll always appreciate being dealt with in a clear, open, honest, and a direct manner. Even if it is a decision that they might not like, usually people always come around. But it's all about the people. It always will be. And then I think it's also about, establishing a purpose. What lights you up? What really lights you up and how can that be sustainable? But the people is the number one thing, and that's where I've been really fortunate. And I know I've been a better coach when I have better players and better coaches around me. And, it gets a lot more difficult when you don't have that.
That's outstanding. Anything else you want to say to coaches or parents or kids or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would say is that, you don't necessarily, there's always this, illusion of the societal scoreboard versus this personal scoreboard. And nowadays, there's so many different pressures to try to live up to certain expectations that you set for yourself. And you want to be driven to be great. But I also believe that comparison is the thief of joy. And I think what you always want to measure yourself against is what's the best that you're capable of becoming? Because there's certain different levels, but hey, how motivated, how consistent can I be with that rhythm, with that process? How much can I surround myself with the right kind of people? But how can I also understand that the only scoreboard, I'm not saying you don't want to try to go win, so I don't want this to be misunderstood, but applying the appropriate perspective, when you don't get that result, or when you do, being able to stay, humble in the midst of that. But I would say that best lesson I can always, communicate to people is always try to be the best version of yourself and understand, don't put barriers on what you can accomplish, but allow that to be where your joy comes from being around other people, but also just striving to be the best version of yourself. How can you really challenge yourself to elevate situations and people that you're around on a daily basis? And I believe that'll lead to a peace, a stillness, and a fulfillment that is sustainable over time. Whereas a lot of these temporary things, they're short-lived. That is not short-lived.
That's right. Outstanding. Thank you, Sean. Great job, man. Visit HarbaughCoachingAcademy.org.